Now the thing we're going to look at is skew chisels. Okay, so with the skew, we have a couple different things. We have some issues. We have some good, some bad, some ugly. Okay, let's talk about the good first, right? And some people say, well, you're talking about the skew. There's only ugly. That's what I hear sometimes. Well, I would have to say that the skew is a very misunderstood tool. It's quite easy to use, and it's quite easy to catch. And if you use it properly, you can get really wonderfully clean and good shear cuts with it. It is a shear cutter, and there are some reasons why I think people have issues with it. One is with respect to the type of grind you're using. I prefer more of a slightly convex shape like this, as opposed to a more straight and flat ground tool, and we'll see why. For this, you can't really make very good peeling cuts with that. Something like that's too round like that, you lose the inability to get that nice 90-degree corner when you're making peeling cuts, and it's thought of more of as a scraper. So with respect to it being thought of as a scraper, one of the downsides of the skew isn't the skew. I always say that, I started saying it, it's not a skew problem, it's a you problem. And that being said, that's a commentary on a little bit of misunderstanding on how it's used. So let's go ahead. I'll pass this one around. This is the type of skew that I use, and this is the type of shape that I prefer right here, which is just a slightly more convex shape, rather than a really extreme asymmetric shape right there. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So we'll go ahead and get this set up. So you guys give me a second here. Okay. So this will just be between centers work, and we'll keep the torque up, or the torque down, the high speed up. And so what we're going to do is I'm actually going to rough down this cherry blank. This is cherry. I'm going to rough this down between centers with the skew chisel. I'm going to show you how to do that, okay? And then we're going to talk about why the skew. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think, right? Here, I got it. You got it. Here, yeah, there we go. Thank you. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a cylinder. Once we have a cylinder, we're going to do some bead rolling exercises, and that will allow us to take a look at what's happening with the tool, and then also with respect to the body mechanics, and also probably make a little smaller object. I'm going to pass this around again. This little top, I'm going to try to make, well, I will. I'm not going to try. I'm going to do it. This is a spinning top with a loose ring on it. It's all done with the skew chisel. If you can make something like that with the skew only, you know what you're doing. You have an understanding of the tool. So basically what we'll start out with is doing some exercises that are a more larger, refined version of, the overall exercises that lead into the spinning top, which is more of a refined version of the techniques in our practice here. So I know I have a 4-prong center over here. I brought my own. I always try to be handy like that. And I'm just going to gauge this by eye and see where that's center. And that looks just about close to good enough. And that's just about perfect. And let's see where we end up on this side. And that's good enough for me. Good enough. Kelly cuts a mean blank. Kelly cuts a mean blank. All right. So we'll go ahead and make sure that we have the tool rests up here. Don't want it too high or too low. That's a little too high. We want the tool rest so that when the skew is about 90 degrees flat, it's just slightly above center, and that's good enough. The skew that you have out there, I don't need that back yet. Of course, our friend here in the back may run off with it again. I'm watching you. No, but what I'm going to do is take a look at the grinder and grind this up. The skew chisel is really one of the easiest tools to grind. It tends to cut really well with about 20 degrees on both sides. And what we don't want, what we want to stay away from with the skew, is we want to have when we're looking down the cross section of the tool, or I should say side view of the tool, the apex or the sort of triangle made at the point of symmetry should run about 90 degrees through it. It shouldn't be off-centered like this. Okay, that's not what we want to see. We want the point of symmetry the point, the top, the tip, however you call it, the triangle, run about straight through all the way center. So that is a commentary on needing to use a platform to grind this tool. You have to use this tool on the platform, okay? Can you do it freehand with a naked freehand? You can, but it's not helpful. It's such an easy tool to grind by hand, and basically this is the best natural jig for it. Natural jig for it is just the standard platform. That's 20 degrees on both sides. That's good. One of the problems with skew chisels is when you get them, this is what you get out of the package, okay? You get this thing right here. You get this flat thing. It's this very asymmetric grind like that. I don't care for that. Again, the reason for that, or I don't know if I mentioned, but if I'm trying to make a peeling cut with something like this, well, I have to move the tool over. Let's assume that the shaft, I should say that the handle of the shaft is attached. I have to move the tool over very extremely to make a peeling cut. And I don't want to do that. Whereas the slight convex shape towards the nose, but so long as I allow for a nice 90-degree corner, again, I don't want that. That's too rounded for me. Don't care for that. I have the same issue with this tool, or if I have to use it, I have to basically rotate the tool in an extreme fashion to the right or to the left to make a peeling cut. This allows me a nice curve. This allows this area that if I have a slight convex shape in the center, this takes a nice fat shaving. So I do like that, and we'll see how that works, how that's working. Again, I don't want this right here. I want to have a nice 90 degree apex that I'm looking on the side view of the tool, the point of symmetry all the way up. So we can go ahead and take a look at this, how to create this grind. When I get a tool directly out of a package, a skew, it's not ground correctly. Now, its bevel is usually correct, but it needs a little housekeeping, okay? Let's go ahead and take a look at this. As long as I line the bevel up, should be good. Let's see where that ends up. Nope. Wolverine jigs are very good. It's a good little system. By far they're by far the best platforms out there, in my opinion. And let's see if that's at about 20 degrees. That's pretty close. It's got to be just right though. And that looks good. Okay. So what I want to do is when I'm rotating the tool, can we have a good view there? I don't want to rotate it this way, like that. So here's the long point of the tool, okay? Long point of the tool is right here, facing right here. I want to start at 90 degrees right here and move it forward like that. I want the convex portion of this edge to be just to the right of that area. In other words, I don't want to create, so as to not create this, I have to start with the long point of the tool at 90 degrees and not rotate it like that. I want to rotate it like that on the shorter point or the toe or heel of the tool. That's where I want the convex shape to be, not on the long point, okay? So let's go ahead and turn the grinder on, see where we stand. And I'll grab my glasses. So let's see where that dresses. That's perfect. There we go right here, and I'll rotate it on this side. But when I get to the area where the nose is, this point on the nose is at 90 degrees. I keep it at 90 degrees right here. Right there. Very good. Now, that's what I should see, is a nice grind, just like that. I don't know if we can see it well. But essentially what you have out there, it's exactly the same thing, okay? Now, let's talk about the burr. Now, some people advocate for keeping the burr on or taking it off. I advocate for taking it, or for keeping it on. I want the burr on there because it makes a little bit more of it's a little bit more, I wouldn't say aggressive, but it cuts a bit faster. And I want it to cut a little bit faster. The other thing I get asked is, which side should the burr be on? Which side should I have the burr on? Well, that really kind of depends, in my opinion. Because I'm right-handed, and most of my peeling cuts are with the long point facing to my left, right? Most of my peeling cuts, because I'm right-handed, are going this way, are basically starting from the tailstock side and moving in towards the left, for the most part. If I were left-handed, the likelihood is that, again, if I'm cutting this way, I'm making my peeling cuts this. Very good. That's where the camera should be. Very good. Thank you. So I should because I'm right-handed, I want the burr on this side, so as to when I make my peeling cuts, it'll peel a little faster because the wood's coming on this side right here. That's the tendency. So when I'm grinding this tool, if you're left-handed, you probably do the opposite, okay? So if I'm grinding this tool, going back to the grindstone, right, so as to not get this grind, get this very disproportionate side view right here, this apex, right? I don't want that. I have to ensure that I grind both sides of this tool every time. I can't just I can't just do this and be done. Go back. Now I can get away with it a few times, but eventually it's eventually gonna overgrind to the extent that one side is basically jarring to the left or right. It's going to be, it won't be the 90 degree symmetry point will be lost. So that's important to remember. So when you grind a skew chisel, take advantage of the fact that it's the easiest tool to grind in your collection. It's easy. Always grind both sides and have a little platform that's dedicated to 20 degrees for both sides for it when you're setting up doing skew work, okay? And if you use it as a doorstop, just keep using it as a doorstop, right? Paperweight, back alley weapon, whatever the terminology is, right? So what I'll do in order to ensure that the burr remains on the top side, I'll actually sharpen. Let's go ahead and get that view again, if we can. Thank you, sir. We'll sharpen this side first. That's the long point. I'll sharpen the underside first to put the burr on that side, on the underside, and then I'll sharpen this side last. So underside first, second side last to put the burr on the top, okay? There's that, and then underside. Very good. A little bit more. The other thing that doesn't get talked about with skews very often, because there's really not too many people that talk about the skew. There's a few people that do. I'm one of the people that talks about skews. Is the edges are very sharp, okay? Some skews, the nicely manufactured ones, this is a laser tool, this is a wonderful tool. This is the one I use exclusively. But thank you. I appreciate that that you brought it back. It's very good. Very good. Good job. So these edges are very sharp, and so the idea is that if I'm using this tool not as a scraper in that it's not flat on the tool rest like this, the tool is rotated on its side like this. So it's not like here, it's like that. Now, can I scrape with it? I can, but I don't think of it as a scraper. When I do think of it as a scraper, I'm doing peel scraping cuts to get down to smaller diameters, okay? But then that's an okay cut because that scraping cut is a commentary on getting to those diameters so as to then use the tool as a shear cutter, again, which it is a shear cutting tool, okay? So why am I jarring off into that? Well, the reason for that is that if I'm using this tool as a shear cutter, it means that the edges are on its side digging into the tool rest, but they shouldn't be digging. The reason they dig is because the edges of the tool are very sharp. So these have to be ground or beveled in this fashion, okay? They just have to be beveled very slightly. Just like that. There's that side, and then this side. That's all you need. And then it's best to, if you have some, which I probably have some somewhere, but this is good enough. You just want to bevel that, and then you take some 80 to 60 grit sandpaper and just go like that on the edges. Then that way they won't dig into the tailstock, or sorry, to the tool rest. Good to remember. So let's go ahead and get this started. What I'm going to do is rough this piece down with the skew chisel. Okay, it's good to see so that you have an understanding that it can be done, and we'll get a good. We're going to get a really good idea how the skew cuts and what's going on with it. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So it's fair practice to start cutting a blank in the very center, not because it's correct, but so that you can see what's happening in terms of the grain direction. And what we do actually want to do is start on our sides and make cuts that are going one way or the other, towards the center. But if we were to start at the very center, we'll see why we can't do it, okay? We can't do that. Here's why. We have a wall of end grain that we're cutting into. See that right there? If you see all that, ooh, look at that. Isn't that nice? Wow. True spindle turner right there, right? That's awful. Not good. Trouble is we don't have a runoff point, and the runoff point that we have is one giant entire wall of end grain here. And if I were to make the same cut the other direction, over this way, same issue follows. What I have to do is I have to have a runoff point for this tool, which is not end grain. It should just be air or space, okay? So I have to start on the very end of a blank and always move my way in towards the center. That's very important. So coming in this way instead. And that's the proper way to grind or to remove the stock this way. And what I'm doing is each pass I'm basically running into a nice area where I have nice smooth material right there, as you can be seeing. But that's what I should be seeing right there. Very good. So I'll just continue that all the way down, and we'll talk about the use of the tool, why it catches, and the best way to create shear cuts with it. Body mechanics work obviously very much with this. We need to make sure that when we make these cuts, don't have the tool on it. I'm not hanging out like this, like that. I'm not trying to stab at the wood, and I'm not squeamish and scared of it like that. I can also turn around and with the long point, go to the left. All the way in. Now that I've created a runoff point for myself, and basically I don't have an entire giant wall of end grain, I can kind of go either way. Piece has been chewed up sufficiently. And eventually, once you stop hearing that noise and you hear that, that's how you know you're chewed up. That's what you should be hearing. Not that. You want to hear that. Similarly, with respect to where my hand is on the right, or my right hand is on the ferrule of the tool, or I should say my thumb is, and again my my pointer finger is up towards the tool handle, right in this region. Right there. It's somewhere around in this area right there. There we go. I'll go up here like that. But ultimately the tool's at my side. I'm not out here like that with a gap. There's no gap between the tool and my body. The two are working in conjunction with each other, just like that, okay? So we're going to talk about pretty soon why this tool catches so badly. And also talk about that it's actually one of the easiest catches to avoid and to create, and why that is. Okay? All the way to the end, and that should be good. Much similar to the other blanks we're cutting, this shouldn't be absolutely perfect, even though there's really very little tear out on it. There's no tear out on it. Shouldn't be any. Yeah, there's no tear out. Not a lick of tear out. None whatsoever. But it's not a perfect cylinder. That's not the point. Let's go ahead and talk about the cutting action of this tool. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and sharpen this again. Now, when I sharpen it again, it's not one side, it's both sides. Sharpen the underside first. And sharpen the top. There we go. So who here has ever had to catch with a skew chisel? Yep. Yep. Well, let's talk about that. How did it make you feel? Not so good? Yeah, I can understand. Well, the reason the skew catches so badly is, and reliably so, is because of the unsupported edge basically drifting away from the cut. So let's go ahead and create that. Let's take a look at some good cuts first. Now, you can, with respect to the direction you're cutting, go to the right or to the left with the long point or the short point. I prefer going to the left, I prefer going to the right with the short point of the tool because of the ease in which my body can work with that cut, meaning that if I am going this direction that I'm cutting right now with the long point, that places the tool so that if I'm at it creating that cut, my body's all the way over here and it's very uncomfortable for me. It's much easier that if I'm right-handed, I use the short point or the toe of the tool to go to the right in this way. Par for the course it usually is most of the time. And when I go to the left, I use the long point leading left in this way. Now, when you start creating nice cuts with the skew, there's a certain type of shaving that you'll catch or that you'll get, and it should look something like this. These are the kind of shavings you want to see. This stuff right here. Those are the kind of shavings that indicate you're actually cutting quite clean. And so that's that. So what's happening is that this is the unsupported edge right here. That's the edge that's cutting. As you can see, that's where the dust is coming off of. When this drifts into the direction opposite of the cut, that's when we have a catch. It's one of the safest catches in wood turning to practice. Again, we're not practicing for catches, but we're practicing so that we know how to not create it, okay? So it's safe in that if we're between centers and we're practicing and we have stock that's reliably without splits or damage, we can create that catch to understand the mechanics of it. So I do recommend being able to do that, and at least being able to show that. So let's go ahead and do that. First, I'll just go ahead and show some nice cuts here. And when I start the cut properly, what I'm doing is I have the bevel rubbing this way, and I'm just raising the handle. And when I raise the handle, not with the tool flat, this tool is not flat, the tool is on its side, like this. Again, not flat at 90. There's a gap between here and here. There's a gap, okay? A gap. So, tool's on its side, up like this. This side is not cutting. Bevel rub, raise the handle. I should see a burnish mark develop somewhere up there. When I see the burnish mark, I just basically, with my weight behind the tool, and with respect to the tool being at my side, I just push that forward, and I create a nice cut once I pick it up, okay? I can do the same thing on the other side. Again, this is the right way. Unsupported edge, supported edge right here. When this drifts in the direction of the cut, that's where we get our catch. Because what's happening is the entire edge is reading that it wants to be on there, where basically you can only cut with probably a little less than half of the entire edge at once with the skew. Now we'll go ahead and create that cut. That's a nice one. Very good. All right, now let's screw this blank up. Ready? All right, so here's a catch. Unsupported edge is going to drift in the opposite direction of the cut. Oh, I hate this tool and I'm never going to use it ever again in my life, right? That's usually what people say. I'm done forever, and then 4-letter words that are very colorful follow. Okay, let's do it again. And I'm going to show you how bad this blank can get, and when we see the results that are as bad as we can make them, it's enough to influence one to never use this tool ever again. I'm here to try to dispel that that's a good idea, why you shouldn't do that. So, oh, there's another catch. So what's happening is that unsupported edge is just drifting, and if not, basically what's happening is that gap is being closed and coming down. See? See? Let's do it again. Catch heaven. Catch heaven. Let's take a look at what we did. Wow. How about that? Nice. You see? Really? Right? So,
Everyone get the 30 grit out, right? Forget. So that's when you see results like this, it's enough to where you after you're done cursing and hopefully you go for a walk and just relax. It's enough to just say, you know what, screw it, I'm going to use gouges forever. Well, I'm telling you that if you can do that, and but I'm telling you, all you need is just a little bit of body mechanics, a little bit of etiquette with this. So if you know how to create the catches, just know that if the unsupported edge either drifts or drops into the drops on the tool handle, and that gap is removed, you're always going to get a catch. Now, can we do the same thing on the other side? Well, sure. Catches are an equal opportunity employer, so to speak. If you can if you can get catches on the right side of the tool, you can get just as many catches on the other side. So let's go ahead and do that. Don't have to worry about tear out, or sorry, well, tear out is the problem and main concern. But let's go ahead and do it on the other side. What I was trying to say is that don't have to worry about screwing the blank up. This is practice, and we're going to go ahead and screw this up nicely. We'll do that with actually some peel cuts, and we'll talk about doing that, and the merit of using a peel cut. So, same thing, tool drops, I get a really bad catch, okay? Same thing, bad catch. Same thing, bad catch. So that gap that I have there is important, right there, that area from here to here. It's when this unsupported edge either drifts in the way, drifts in the direction of the cut, like that, drops. Bad catch. So let's go ahead and clean this up. But first, let's see how bad I did to this side. Let's see if it's any worse than that side. I wonder which side's worse. It's just about as crappy either side. It's really bad. Does not look good. So what we can do with something like this is utilize a peeling cut. Now, could I scrape this all day long and do this? Well, yeah, I can scrape, but I don't want to think of this tool as a scraper, okay? These are standard scraping cuts like that. Yeah, I'm creating shavings, but it's not a good cut. It's very, the fibers are meant to be sliced because all the grain is facing at 90 degrees to the axis. My ability to slice the fibers very cleanly exists with the skew chisel very well because I'm basically slicing the fibers at 45 degrees on a downhill plane, on a slightly downhill plane or 90 degree plane. That allows me to create a beautifully burnished cut. Now, even though the scraping that I did may have cleaned up a little bit, it's not a very good cut and it's not very clean. So we don't want to think of this tool as a scraper or a catcher. We don't. And now there is a type of cut though that is scraping, which is a peel scraping cut. Now the peel scraping cut's okay. And again, the reason I have my burr on the top side of the tool, again, is because I'm making my peel scraping cuts for the most part with the long point right here. Long point left, and this grind right there, that's what I'm using, okay? This should have a little bit more of a curve in it, but it's okay. Thanks for that. And so what the peeling cut allows me to do, it's not a cut that should reliably get me down to a surface that I'm happy with for a finish. It should get me down to a surface that is basically beyond a point like this of tear out, or just to get to, or it's a stock waste removal cut, to get down to a diameter that I want to be at so as to be able to utilize that cut again, the shear cut, okay? So anyways, let's go ahead and do some peel cuts. This should at least get us beyond the tear out, the long point leading. And as long as we get down past that tear out, I can go ahead and use the shear cut again. So this cut's okay. Let's see where that's at. That's pretty good. Should be good enough of a palette to be able to then shear cut again. Then we'll roll some larger beads. See there's a good, so that's a good scraping cut. That's okay. Now again, we don't want to think of that as the main cut, but let's go ahead and get down to, since we have these little ridged areas, now we'll shear cut this really beautifully. This is with the toe of the tool with a short point. That's a very nice cut. Let's go the other way. Same thing, only with the long point leading. Say that again.
Very good question. So yeah, on the peeling cut, the peeling cut is a 90-degree flat scraping cut. So where there's no manipulation of the tool in that it's on its side and basically rotating on it, having been rotated on its side to move either to the right or left on the tool rest. It's a cut where it's 90 degrees flat, and all I'm doing is basically I'm trying to raise the handle because that's a good angle you're at in there. Is just raising the handle. So the peeling cut's not one where I'm pushing forward. I'm just allowing the the natural, I guess you could say, inertia of the tool of the wood to just that process to just take place, just by way of the bevel catching it. So it's catching it, and then I'm just raising the handle. And there's a slight push inward, but it's very soft. It's not an aggressive cut. Again, with respect to body mechanics, push cut or peeling cut's not one where I'm going like this. It's not a stab. It's basically one where I'm just very lightly with finesse lifting the handle like this. And again, when I do it, the tool, I'm almost all the time feeling this tool rub against my torso at some point. It's all rubbing against my side. It's not out here doing a bunch of stuff. It's always right here. I can always feel the tool. Par for the course is that if you are cutting correctly and you feel those tools if you feel the cutting action properly, it's not because you're feeling the cutting action. It's not just a coordination between proper cuts with respect to the proper angles and such. It's with respect to that in conjunction with the tool being on its side. I should say the handle at one side, using the torso and upper body to make those cuts rather than pushing with aggression. So let's go ahead and finish that up and go ahead and finish these cuts right there. Then we'll talk about some beads and some practice with that. What this will eventually lead into is making a spinning top with a loose ring. I'll see if I can put a few on it, which it's pretty fun. It's a fun thing to do. It's fun to make. So that'll be a little project that we do. So it looks like I almost just dug right in with the long point of the tool. I have to be careful. What I don't want to do is this. Like that, be aggressive like that. I want to have the tool with the bevel rubbing first. Move it forward like that. See a burnish mark, see the dust. As I see the dust, basically I'm raising the tool handle or rotating it in the direction of the cut. Bringing it forward like that. Do one more cut the other way and we should be good. That's a nicely cut cylinder. Okay? Good practice right there. Very good. So now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll take this other tool. This is the smaller version. Why don't I pass this around now? This is the Beast, a burden. Careful, this is very sharp, as it should be. Okay? But that's what I was just working with. This is the exact same grind. It's very similar at least. And so what we'll do now is cut some wider spherical shaped beads. Okay? Should be the same degree of angle. Should be about 20 degrees on both sides. Don't fret if it's 18.9738. It doesn't matter. If as long as it's about 20 degrees, that's good enough. Well, actually, let's sharpen the other side first. Again, I'm doing this so that I end up with the burr on the other side of the tool, basically on the top side of the tool with the long point facing left, because I'm a righty, even though I'm ambidextrous. And there you have it. That's good. So what I'm going to do now is cut some beads, and this is a good practice right here, is to cut to cut wider spherical shaped beads. Can anyone guess why it would be better for me to cut a wider shaped bead that's more sphere shaped than a thinner bead? Say a thinner bead would be, well, what's that? A thinner bead would be something that's about less than 1/4 of an inch. Why is it better to cut a wider spherical shaped bead in practice of this tool, do you suppose? Just say anything, it doesn't matter. I'm just wetting your whistle? Okay, good. That's good enough. So the reason why it's better to cut a wider bead is because we're practicing the use of shear cutting across a wider surface in length. Okay, if you, for instance, are to cut, it's not as if you cut a thinner bead like this. These are just V grooves, of course. The tendency is that if you just cut little thin V grooves like that and roll beads like this, you learn and you understand the mechanics of the tool, but the tendency is that you create little apexes, little angles right there. If you cut a rounded surface that's sphere-like, a spherical shaped bead, you have to you're basically, because you're shear cutting over a wider surface, you have to use the eye to properly gauge whether or not you're actually creating that shape. So with something like this, you can almost cheat a little bit and just kind of make little V grooves, and you're not really practicing the rolling of the tool over the surface. So let's take an illustration from that idea and cut a wider bead. Little V grooves. Oh, little catch. Never seen that before. So let's go ahead and roll those beads. Start with this one, okay? So the tendency with most turners that I see when they're rolling beads is they start from the very center, which is okay, but if you start with the long point of the tool, the tendency is that you'll get a very sharp flat spot at the top. You'll get a sharp corner. What you want to do is start with the short point of the tool, because the point of symmetry is convex. You'll cut a more convex shape. If you start with the long point of the tool, you'll cut more of a cone shape. If you start with the long point of the tool on a wider bead, you won't cut more of a spherical shape. You'll cut more of a downhill, kind of straight 90-degree pointed shape. So you have to start with the short point. That's the short point right there, or the toe. Start at center and roll the tool this way, like this. Do the same thing on the other side. This is the short point, starting at center, and that cuts a nice spherical shaped bead. Now when we get down to the point to where those beads break, the curve of those beads break, then we can roll the tool over on the long point and just go downhill like this, and then go downhill on the other side. Then we have a nice spherical shaped bead. It's very nice. This is the best way to practice the use of this tool. Now, this practice can sometimes seem tedious, but these cuts are all a commentary on making very small, to getting down to the smaller diameter where you're seeing the really very refined pieces, like a little spinning top with loose ring. They're all the same cuts, okay? It's all downhill shear cuts. Let's also pass around this other little handout that I have. It's about the finer points of the skew chisel. That's mine right there. Let's cut a bead right here with the long point. If I go long point going down, the tendency is that I won't have a nice spherical shaped bead. I'll just create what you'll see, and it's very aggressive too, okay? It's because the point of symmetry is on the longer point, wants to create more of a conical shape. So this is what I see with most of my students, is when they roll downhill with the long point, this is what they create. Just something like that instead. See? You ever made a bead like that with a skew? Well, if you have, it's because you're using the long point of the tool to roll instead of the short point at center first. You have to start with the center, or start with the short point of the tool and roll the tool forward like that. Same thing, other way. Long point, and then we just raise the handle, bring it forward. That's a nice spherical shaped bead. Nice spherical shaped bead. Let's keep doing that. Then I continue downhill with a long point. So far more consistent, far better to start with the short point or the heel at center. And because it's a convex shape and the point of symmetry is rounded in that area, not pointed, it cuts more of a nice convex curve rather than a point. Again, I'm switching over to the long point after I've made my initial descent downward with the short point. But you'll see a far more consistently round bead in that way, okay? You can see that when I'm doing this, the tool's at my side, and I'm not pushing the tool. It's just I'm basically lifting the handle, coming in and out like that. So I can just refine these beads. And the whole idea is to create them as symmetrically perfect as you can get them. So with respect to making spherical shaped beads, you can see that I'm basically I'm taking the tool over a longer surface. So they're harder to make. So if I make really thin, skinny beads over here, well, yeah, I can make them, and I can make them well, but it's harder to make a spherical shaped bead or a row of them in such a way that the shape mirrors itself. And if you do that, that lends itself to very good practice, okay? The point with this little exercise is to practice. So that's the idea right there, is to create some nice spherical shaped beads. Let's do one more in here. Just kind of round that over, and we can just call this good. And then I'll switch to some dry stock and work on some things across with the chuck, probably spinning top with a loose ring. We'll do that all with the skew chisel, which is a fun little project. There's that. So if you can cut beads like that are clean in this way, no real tear out, and they're just very consistent, that's a commentary on the idea of good tool control. And these kinds of cuts translate very well to the next type of project that we're making, which is a spinning top with loose ring. Okay? So again, the difference between a wider bead like this and the thinner bead like that is that the tendency is that people, I think, trick themselves into thinking that they're rolling the tool correctly or they're using it correctly on little small beads because they're not going over a wider surface. Well, if you really want to check your work with respect to rolling beads correctly and shear cutting them, you roll a wider bead. You roll a more spherical shaped bead, and you'll check your honesty. I'll tell you what, you'll see where you're at. So there's that. I'll pass these around. This is just kind of an exercise. But what I can do now then is go into another project, and we can do spinning top with loose ring. Do any of you guys need to take a break, or are you good? Or you good? Okay, cool. And then where are we for time? Just whatever?
Yeah, we typically, we're done anywhere between
noon and 1:30? Okay. Wonderful. Okay, so then we can go ahead. Very good. Okay, so then we can go ahead and pass that around. And then I will go to the secret wood chamber and grab something while you guys take a look at that. Any questions on the skew? Any general questions on the skew chisel before I go to the secret wood chamber? No? Okay. Very good. Be fair. Share, folks. Come on. All right. Well, I see some black walnut, so I grabbed it. Naturally. So what I'll do is start again with the skew chisel. It's between centers, and oh boy, that's tight. Go ahead and rough this down. See if we can get a few different loose rings with spinning tops on them. This is a fun little project. This is a hard one. This is kind of an advanced thing. This is at the point where I start doing a little show off. I'm kind of turned into a show off. But what you'll see in respect to all the different exercises we just did with the skew is that the reflection of this project is one that has to do with all the exercises we've just been doing. And so basically we're talking downhill shear cuts, planing cuts, and we'll speak more on that when we get down to it. So I'll go ahead and rough this down between centers. Give myself a tendon on here. I can go ahead and rough this down with a 3/4 inch skew. Again, tool out the side, not out here like this, trying to make my cuts. Watching for that unsupported edge so that unsupported edge doesn't drop or move in the direction away from the cut. If I am to move the unsupported edge at all, I'd want to rotate it this way so as to be able the tool just kick off this way rather than have a catch that way. Okay? Or better yet, just don't have a catch. That's always nice. Now this stock looks like it might be a little bit too small diameter for the one-way stronghold, or it's going to be really close. I'll go ahead and make a parting cut right there. And what I'll do is actually put this piece in a chuck and make my parting cut so I can just remove it. That's what I'll do. And I'm sure we have a knockout bar over here. Put the chuck back on, and we'll have a couple of blanks that'll allow us to do a few little spinning tops. We'll start out with one that's fairly simple and then get to something that's super ornate. We'll see if this diameter works for this black walnut. It's going to be really close. It's awfully small diameter. I think it might fit. This is a stronghold chuck. Might not. No, just barely. Actually, it will, I think. Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be good for us. Us as in me. Let's go ahead and get this so that it's on point, on center. That's good enough. Pretty sure I have a parting tool with me. Yeah, I thought I did. I came prepared enough. Yeah, it's good enough for me. Nice and centered. You can see my entire body is making these cuts. It's not just like that. You know, it's basically coming in and I'm just raising my shoulder like that. Raising my shoulder like that. Lower the speed on that. I have a parting tool. As simple or simpler than to sharpen as the skew. It's just a 90-degree cut. Just putting it in like that. See the sparks come over the top, and I know that that's nice and sharp. Make sure that I lower the tool rest just a little bit so that when I put this tool flat, I'm not dead center. Go ahead and do that. It's good enough. Good. I'm going to ensure that I have a really nice tight fit here. Should be good. And so then I'll switch over to using a half-inch skew. And I'll go ahead and put this right here. You can just have those and take them home with you. Go ahead. I'm sure everyone wants them. This is also, that looks like it's been ground pretty well, but for the sake of, well, here we're at a demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and ensure that this is nice and sharp. Same grind, half-inch version of the others. Put that burr on the top side. All right, let's go ahead and create something kind of interesting. If we can go ahead and take a look at, make sure that the camera is properly set or positioned. So this is all going to be done with the skew chisel. So all my cuts are downhill. Now one thing I could do is I could clean the end grain this way. And so what's a little bit counterintuitive is that with this cut like right there, instead of actually having the unsupported edge drift away to create the catch, I want to ensure that when I'm cleaning the end grain, the unsupported edge drifts into the end grain slightly. It's not so extreme that it's going to catch, because it will catch that way. But in order for me to make the proper shear cut downhill on the end grain and actually shear it up, I do have to rotate the unsupported edge slightly in the direction of the end grain this way. That's the unsupported edge moving in the way. A bit counterintuitive, because again, if I rotate it too much, similar to with the gouge and both of the flute, basically both edges of the gouge on its side, they'll catch and kick out like that. Similar. Go ahead and chew that up. Can we get a better look at the me chewing the end grain up? Is it possible? Let's get right up there and just right up there close. Just like that. Yeah. So basically, and I'm always making this cut with the long point of the tool. I'm never using the short point or the rounded point, the convex point, the toe, the heel, whichever you'd like to call it. The short point of the tool is not making that cut. It's always the long point of the tool that makes the cut downhill. Like that, okay? Always. I think that's good enough. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and remember, this is with the short point, so I'm going to get more of a convex shape. And like that. Nice burnish cut. Now if I go with the long point, this is with the long point now. That's the long point right here. If I go downhill like that, that's going to create more of a conical shape. So I could do that if I'd like. Doesn't really matter. It depends on how I'm seeing it. So we'll start out pretty basic with this one, and so it's just a series of rolling the tool or rotating it. The issue with the idea of rolling a skew chisel is that you're not really rolling it. It's a flat tool. You can rotate it. That's the sound of rotation. Rolling is on round stock, is how I see it. So it's more of a rotation than it is a roll. Downhill cut. Why not make something kind of interesting and ornate? Fine detail, finesse. The skew is really a finesse tool. It's not one that's meant to be used aggressively at all. And I promise you, if you use it that way, well, we illustrated first time out what that does. It doesn't work, does it? But if you're looking for a catch, then you will get one. Peeling cuts are good. Again, they get us down to the smaller diameter, only to allow us to use the tool in shear cutting mode in order for us to actually make clean cuts. That's the whole point. Okay? Like that. And I'll bevel that. Keep the blood in the veins. I still feel like keeping the blood in my veins right now. Okay? Every once in a while I have someone who there's a genius in the audience who says, yeah, but I really wanted to see what it looks like when you don't. What happens when you don't keep the blood in the veins? What is that like? He's like, no, I'm not going to demonstrate that today. Maybe another day. Yeah, right. And now the point right now is to be able to decide where I want this loose ring to be. And essentially a loose ring is just a bead that I have access to, enough access and clearance on both sides between the stem and the head or the spinning top area or in this area to be able to get in there and create that ring. Sorry, to loosen it. So we're getting closer. What I do need to be careful of is that to not take so much material away from here so as to be so thin that I can't make any of my cuts out here and actually create the stem. That's what I have to be careful with. So I'm just making really fine detail cuts, being very careful about all of it. And it looks like if I put my bead right here, there's a V-groove right here. If I'm to, it looks like I have the clearance, probably, if I put it right here. So I'll put my loose ring right here. So essentially the loose ring is just a bead that I cut first. And to make sure that the bead is, I first start out with a V-groove and ensure that the V-groove has far enough distance again from this area right here so that I have clearance to be able to use the long point of the tool to get underneath it and on the other side. And so what I'll do is now gauge the size of that bead. Now I'm just continually gauging it. That looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. Very good. Roll this area over. This is really just fine detail cuts. I still have enough material on the other side to be able to account for making some fine detail cuts. Nothing heavy. No peeling cuts ever. I don't at this point ever want to make a cut that's 90 degrees. Every cut that's going to be over here will be a cut that's at 45 degrees going downhill. Okay, not going to have a 90-degree cut with this much material still there. It's enough to make very light cuts, but again, can't do anything really heavy. Got to be careful. Safety first. So go ahead and get underneath there. Now I have to ensure that on my ring that the length of the ring or the height of the bead is equivalent to the length of it. Okay? If it's too thin on the height of the bead, the tendency is that when I go underneath the bead, it will just break free. I have to have an equivalent length and height to the bead. So that looks pretty good. Happy with that. Now I'll go ahead and continue on this side. Very good. And roll the bead over. So that should be the right diameter. I think that looks pretty good. And then I'll just basically get underneath it with the long point. Whenever I release a bead, a loose ring, and turn it into a loose ring from a bead, I always use the long point of the tool. Looks pretty good. I want to go ahead and round that over. So basically all I'm doing is that it's kind of hard to see, but basically I have a wall of material up on this side. Very good. Yeah, so it looks like this would be the most appropriate side to break the loose ring, break the ring free on that side into here, okay? I'm ensuring though that, again, I have the similar height on this bead and width so as to not be too thin that it just breaks off. That's pretty important. And I need to ensure that I have the clearance, which I've granted myself that I do. Looks good. And the curve initially established to be able to get in there with the long point to be able to break that free. So that looks looking pretty good. There we go, loose ring. Right there. Very good. So at that point you can be really excited and happy, but you got to finish the project. You're not done yet. And it's pretty thin, and we have to be careful still, so we're not out of the water yet. So. But we can be pretty happy that we did that. Very good. And probably add a little bit of detail out here. Okay. That stem's getting really thin, so I have to be careful. Add a little bit of detail right there. I kind of like the shape of this. I always like when it's always nice to enjoy the pieces that you make. This is one that I find the design to be desirable. I think it looks good. I'm happy with it. So a little bit of detail doesn't hurt anything. And then what I'll do is I'll just kind of be very careful. Just like that. And the area when you're spinning a top, you don't want it to feel too flat, or sorry, not too flat, but you don't want to feel a sharp point. That's nice right there. That's a nice design. You want it to be slightly rounded. That's very good. So that's actually a form that I like and I'm happy with. Now, I could probably lose just a little bit more material before I'm getting too thin. Very good. And I'll go ahead and put a V-groove right here, just to sort of denote a little bit more notion of design. So that's good. So that's my spinning top with loose ring. So I'm going to go ahead and sand this up a little bit. I do like this piece. You guys can take a look at that a little bit. Take a closer look. I will actually add a little bit of sandpaper to that, and I do have some sandpaper in this little backpack over here. So I will throw probably some 220 on it. A little bit of 220, 400, and then some oil wax, and that'll be good. And then I'll probably make another one, and then the other one I'll try to see if I can put 2 loose rings on it. And I've done up to 4 before. That's my max, is 4, all with the skew. So it's hard to do 4. Very difficult. Let's see what we have here. Oh, come on. Oh. Some 180. 180 is good enough. Okay. Careful with sanding detail like this because it's very fine, and all these are all shear cuts. So I want to be really careful as to not really round the detail over, deaden it, flatten it, what have you. I want this to be very nicely cut. But anyways, this is the idea of a really fine little object. If you can create something like this with the skew, again, it's a commentary on having an understanding for how it works, and you kind of get it. Let's do one more grit, call that good, and let's do a higher grit, like we could do 220, we could do 240. Let's just do 240. There's that. That should be good enough. And I'll add a little bit of oil and then a little bit of wax. This is just walnut oil. And there's that. So for the top, or for the ring, we'll go ahead and spin it on there. Yeah, this thing better spin because I spent a lot of time, right? Again, if it doesn't, it's just a lopsided chess piece. It's something else, right? But again, the other thing that I talk about, or that I've mentioned in refining the process of wood turning, is that if it doesn't spin, just make another one. Just make one until it spins. Not a big deal. Didn't take that long to make. So there's that. Let's go ahead and see what it looks like with the oil on it. Pretty nice. There's our loose ring. We'll pass that around and take a look at it. It's a nice little piece. Put a little bit of wax on it, and you guys can have this. You guys can have this piece. Okay. A little bit of wax. Just a little just beeswax type thing. Good enough. Light buff. Then I'll come over this side. I don't know if you can see it so well. So I'll do my best to, yeah, it's probably okay right there. And last little cut right here, right there. Okay. And it better spin. It will. It should. It should, in theory. And so there's that. You can take a closer look. I'll go ahead and take some, probably I think this is 180 or yeah, it was 240. Okay, 240 is good. And I'll go ahead, add a little bit of oil wax on the top. Doesn't really need much of anything. It's clean enough. Just need to remove that top portion. That's nice and round now. Looks good. Throw some wax on it. Oil, whatever. And then we'll go ahead and take a look at this, if you want to see that. First we'll have to see if it spins, so I'll actually go over here. If it spins, it wins, is what I say. It better. Well, then it's just a down payment on the fact that I have to make another one, which I will. So there's that. Spinny top of loose ring. Yeah. Let's do it one more time here. It's kind of cool to watch it with the little ring dancing around on it. Yep. And then if it's a really good top, it'll spin upside down. All right. And I don't have any more tricks after that. I've pretty much run out after that point. After it spins upside down with a loose ring on it, I figured that's good enough. It's like if that's not good enough for you, I don't know how to help you. All right, so there we go.